And I think, Rupert Lowe, you have the first question, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, James, again.
Morning.
Yes, I'd like to start by just asking you a question. I mean, do you subscribe to the view that actually the state should be as accountable to the taxpayer as the taxpayer is to the state? I mean, do you start from that premise?
Yes, and I think the state is pretty transparent in what it shows it's doing, more so in some areas than even the private sector. And
good. So when we look at figure 1 and we see, it's varied. Pre-COVID, we were looking at 76% of public accounts meeting the deadline of the summer. It dropped to 42%, and currently it's sitting at 64%. I mean, do you think that's acceptable?
So we as government must and plan to do better. Happy to go into the issues around all of those things.
So I mean, my question is, and I think we've been over this before in a previous meeting, is in the private sector there are quite severe penalties if you don't file your accounts within a statutory time period. And I think we've identified that actually that isn't the case with government departments and government accounts. If they miss timescales, yes, they may get a bit of criticism, but in the end, you don't suffer the same statutory penalties that you do in the private sector, such as being, in the end, banned from being a director. HMRC leans heavily on you and starts assessing you for taxes they think you owe. That doesn't, I think, happen in the state sector, as we've identified. So there is a schism between the private sector and the public sector in terms of penalties for not basically adhering to a statutory timetable. So why is that not the case with the state?
So I hear what you say, and we've discussed this before.
Wouldn't that be the same?
So as I said, they're legislatively required to lay their accounts by the 31st of January, not legislatively by summer. But they are encouraged to do it before summer. Everyone is meeting the legislative standard, apart from this College of Policing side of things. But to your point, and you can consider whether you feel this is. I mean, I think it's very serious if your accounts are late or indeed qualified or indeed deemed to be you are signing them. I sign the Treasury's accounts personally a number of times. I am personally responsible to Parliament, this committee, other committees.
How many public sector employees have been fired for failure?
For failure to do late accounts.
Failure to deliver accounts.
Quite a number of permanent secretaries have moved in recent things. I don't know whether you'd link it entirely to lateness of accounts. Probably not. But I don't think there's a total lack of accountability in the system. But I take your point, and I wouldn't be able to list numbers of people who've been fired absolutely because of accounting issues, but I'm trying to reassure you that there isn't just a free lunch here, and it doesn't matter. It really is very material. Firstly, whether you get your accounts done before the summer, and that is a huge element. You have to get your accounts ready and then have them audited. And secondly, that you have a clean set of accounts. That is not that's not a low priority for myself or fellow permanent secretaries, and I would go back to the fact that if you're taking the statutory point, people are delivering to the statutory requirements.
Thank you.
This wasn't just a routine exchange. This was a calculated setup, and the senior civil servant walked straight into it without even realizing what was happening. Rupert Lowe didn't raise his voice. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to dominate the room. He asked one simple question. Should the state be as accountable to taxpayers as taxpayers are to the state? A basic question, a logical question, and the answer came instantly. Yes. And that's where everything started to fall apart, because the moment that answer was locked in, the entire system was now forced to live up to it. Lowe didn't waste time. He moved straight to the numbers. Before COVID, around 76% of public accounts were meeting deadlines. Then it dropped to 42%. Now it's only back to 64%. So he asked the obvious question, is that acceptable? And the response? We plan to do better. That's it. No urgency, no consequences, just a promise. Now compare that to the private sector. If a company misses statutory deadlines, it doesn't get encouragement. It gets punished. Fines, investigations, directors can be banned. Authorities step in hard and fast. But when government departments miss deadlines, nothing happens. And that's when Rupert Lowe went for the question that completely changed the tone of the room. How many public sector employees have been fired for failure? And suddenly, everything slowed down. The confidence disappeared. The answers became uncertain, and the truth started to show itself. I wouldn't be able to list numbers. Of course not, because that number would expose everything. This is the double standard no one wants to admit. If you, as a taxpayer, fail to meet your obligations, you face penalties immediately. No excuses, no delays. But when the state fails to meet its own standards, it gets encouraged to improve. Same system, completely different rules. And here's the key point. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was exposure. Rupert Lowe didn't need to shout or argue. He simply forced a direct comparison between the private sector and the public sector, and the system couldn't defend itself. You cannot claim accountability while admitting there are no real consequences. You cannot say, "We take this seriously," while being unable to name a single person held responsible. And you definitely cannot demand strict compliance from taxpayers while operating under a completely softer standard yourself. That's why the room went quiet. Not because the question was complicated, but because it was too simple to escape. Because once you strip away the formal language and long explanations, the reality is clear. There are strict rules for the public and flexible rules for the state. And in that moment, that reality was fully exposed. So here's the real question. If ordinary people face real penalties for failure, why doesn't the same standard apply to those running the system? Drop your thoughts below.